All right. So let me give you the word on this, everybody. And I try to compare what I'm doing to other shows and see what they're covering and things like that. If I'm missing something, sometimes I give more emphasis to stories, and they'll give more emphasis to other stories and things like that. And I thought this would be the proper approach here, especially on Thursday, as we think about what we, perhaps you as well, were told in our elementary schools here in Amherst, New Hampshire, and Moscow, and how it was an experiment in self-governance, which is utterly bogus. It was just an experiment in creating a different government from the government of Britain, and then they usurped that government of the Articles of Confederation and replaced it with the Constitution with a bunch of fuzzy language that allowed people like criminal Alexander Hamilton to expand the government. And now we've got the Imperial presidency. Yes, indeed. The Trump administration, Trump signed. Did you hear about this? I don't know if you heard about this. One of them's really stupid. They're both offensive. He signed 2 new executive orders, and he targets peace organizations by labeling them terrorists. First, the semi-domestic part of this. Okay, so we're going to get hardcore in just a minute. But let me give you this part, which deals with the electric grid. Okay? And again, it's all done for favoritist purposes. It's all done for protectionist purposes. And again, it's nativist, trying to stop foreign competition. And here it is. He has declared, and he did this yesterday, a national emergency. It's right there in Article 9 million of the Constitution. A national emergency to secure the United States bulk power system. Are you familiar with that? If you don't work in the industry, you probably aren't. I certainly wasn't until I started to look into it early this morning. And then I learned very quickly about what is the bulk power system. It's listed on the now National You Paid For It website under American Presidency Project as Executive Order 14,421, because that's how awesome the United States freedom system is. It declares a national emergency over what Dawn claims are foreign threats to the U.S. bulk power, i.e. electric grid system. So maybe your mind is going the same direction my mind went this morning. What exactly are we talking about? How does this break down? What grids? Which ones? There are regional, there are states. What's going on here? Well, in other words, it prohibits many people from buying foreign-made components for electric power movement and conduction or conversion. It generally prohibits or conditions purchases and installations of certain foreign-produced grid equipment. In other words, less expensive stuff. And associated software that pose what Trump arbitrarily calls cybersecurity, sabotage, or supply chain risks. Does anybody hear any ringing of discord here as they push within the NDAA a mixture and integration of the United States national security and military infrastructure with Israel? Is anybody thinking about Palantir? And he's got the gall to be telling us that he knows that these foreign electric grid component suppliers, including people who might supply copper cable, they're the threat. They're the problem. And again, how is this even constitutional? Where does he get off doing this? Did you read that when you were in civics class in 11th grade? I didn't. Did you remember that? I think maybe Abraham Lincoln sneaked it in along with his other crap. Here's a little more. Yeah, he arbitrarily calls these cybersecurity, sabotage, or supply chain risks. In other words, he's going to make the supply chain more expensive by claiming the cheaper stuff that you could get from outside the country is a supply chain risk, which is exactly what he did by blocking all the other stuff. And it directs the Department of Energy. You can again find that in Article 9 million of the Constitution to identify vulnerable equipment, impose conditions where needed, in other words, tariffs or blockages, and favor U.S. manufactured infrastructure. There you go. That's the answer. That's the answer. And guess what? It's just a little bit before the election. So who knows? There might be some industries within certain states that now will be leaning more towards the Trump administration and favoring Trump. Who knows? It's great to live in this experiment of self-governance, isn't it? It's great. It's so good. It does not apply to local electric distribution facilities. So I had to do some breaking down of this. But let me show you the link to the one. You might want to make a Christmas card out of this one. This is great. Maybe, put it up on your tree. Declaring a national emergency. Is there it's kind of off to the wrong start, isn't it? It's on the wrong foot. You're putting your chin out. You're going to get hit. Emergency to secure the United States bulk power system. That's right. Isn't that wonderful? This applies. So this is the breakdown, everybody. If you're interested in this, if you're in any of these states where you got the regional grid from Georgia down to Texas, or you got the California ridiculous, Pacific Gas and Electric PG&E thing, where of course they start all the fires because they put the cables over the government-run land and they have all the dry brush there. Well, here's how it applies. It applies to multi-state electric grids and in-state high voltage grids. I know, if you're a fan of the Electric Six, don't worry, it's coming. That's for you, Ferb. The order defines the bulk power system as the facilities and control systems needed to operate an interconnected electric energy transmission network, because that's definitely where the United States government is supposed to land after the revolution. Absolutely. You go from Ben Franklin to a central Soviet-style authority controlling it. That's definitely an efficient way to do it. Plus, generation needed to keep that system reliable. In other words, they are going to take over the electric grid. And that is something that Biden had been pushing, and Trump started to continue to do it last year, and they're going full bore on it because they're going to call the whole grid anywhere, regional, national, or your state. If it's a high voltage, it's under the federal purview now. They will control it. So that gives a lot of leverage to the executive branch in Washington, D.C. over the very power system in your state. And of course, that would be of 69 kilovolts or higher if it's inside your state. So high transmission lines inside your state of 69 kilovolts or higher, that would fall under, or if it's multi-state. Okay? So here, Ferb, this is for you.
Danger, danger, high voltage, when we touch, when we kiss.
Danger, danger, high voltage, when we cut, when we kiss, when we touch.
That's right. And perhaps I'll do a little AC/DC next time. Then we've got this one. And if you're anywhere near the Great Lakes, well, you probably have been hearing about this. You got it today, this morning. His honoring the American history of the Great Lakes and renaming Lake Ontario as Lake America. There you go. It's like the Gulf of Mexico. It's the Lake of America now. That's awesome, huh? Seriously? He had extra time, so it was like, why not spit in somebody's face again? There we go. It directs the Secretary of the Interior and the U.S. Board of Geographic Names to rename Lake Ontario as Lake America in U.S. federal geographic naming systems within 30 days. That's framing the change as honoring American history and commerce. He's got the gall to say he's honoring commerce. And get this, when we get into the Canada story next, I'm going to add this little Canadian story since we're talking about Lake Ontario. Wait till you see what MS Now, the creature that MS Now decided to bring on to rail against Trump's anti-free trade nonsense. They got a real strong person. I don't know if you already saw it, but yeah, you'll see. You'll see in just a minute. You're never going to believe it. It's just, you just sit there like, did MSN think about this when they were scheduling the guests? Like, hey, I got an idea. Let's think about a way to insult the viewers as much as possible. Well, yeah, so he's changing it to Lake America, but the change applies to U.S. government use and doesn't bind Canada or other countries, of course. But let me show you this one. Canada. The tariff fight still stands, with both sides raising tariffs on most goods by approximately 25% this week, which is, going to be awesome. Have fun getting your kids' school lunches going. That's awesome. Don't forget, there's always the Stephen King, survivor type option. Morphine, put it in the system, and you just eat your own flesh when you're trapped on the island. It's fine. Everything's cool. You lose a lot of weight, but it's all right. It's I don't know how it tastes, but So check out whom MSN invited on to push for freedom. I said you can't make this up. That's right. Chrystia Freeland. Woo! There's a winner. 3-pointer. Boom. Swish. Yeah. They invited Chrystia Freeland on to rail against Donald Trump blocking free trade. You get that? I feel like that dude in the Pink Panther movies, Inspector Dreyfus, who eventually goes crazy because he can't deal with Clouseau's dumbness. And he's in a padded cell. He's got the straitjacket on him. He goes, every day in every way, I'm feeling better and better. So here it is. I said, when it comes to economic liberty and free trade, Chrystia Freeland isn't the best candidate to promote the cause. Some of the folks who supported the trucker rally against the lockdowns and whom she made sure got their bank accounts frozen might attest to this new hypocrisy that she now displays. Check it out.
Well, first of all, I want to correct one thing that came across in those clips that you played from the administration. This notion that Canada is hard to get along with. I think a regular American person will say, wow, that's kind of weird. I find the Canadians to be quite nice. But I can also give you a data point, which is Canada is the only G7 country that has a trade deal with every other G7 country. So the rest of the world finds it pretty easy to do trade deals with us, and they want to do it. Well, first of all, I want to correct.
I couldn't believe it when I was like, wait a minute, wait. Is somebody waving a magic wand in front of me? Because I can't even believe I'm in reality. This is nuts. Seriously. There are still people trying to get their money back after what she did. It's just, who in the world at MSN, or what is it, MS Now, MS Later, whatever, who in the world said, like, hey, got to get somebody from Canada on to talk about freedom of commerce. Well, Biff, I got an idea. How about that Freeland woman? Yeah, she's got a great record on that, doesn't she? What? Yeah. When she was blocking people's bank accounts and stuff, that was that's freedom, isn't it? Have you had your head? Are you okay? Did you fall today? Are you all right, dude? What a stupid! Oh my gosh, just crazy. Okay, so now I want to go to this one. The U.S. is ready to engage in more piracy, as Lincoln did in the Civil War. That would be the War of Northern Aggression. Yep, the United States wants to revise what they call prize courts to confiscate Iranian oil. Yeah, that's a great idea, isn't it? Oh, yeah, here it is. You got it. U.S. aims to revive Civil War-era court to claim Iranian oil as a prize. So I just looked at this and I saw Sprinter Press had the United States want to revise the prize courts to confiscate this oil. Department of Justice is preparing a mechanism that would allow for the faster recognition of tankers and their cargo seized by the military as what? Huh? Seized by the military as property of the United States. Oh, you mean more piracy. Oh, I see. So I just noted, without any congressional declaration of war or letters of marque and reprisal to hire mercenaries to go after non-state enemies. This is theft. No due process, not even any accusation of a crime. I mean, what I'm saying there, that's not controversial, is it? I mean, I'm just saying facts, like A is A, the identity principle of mathematics. That's what it is, right? It doesn't matter how you feel about it. That's just what they're doing. You might like it, but you have to admit this is what they're doing. These criminals are, the criminals are any U.S. military members who actually follow such immoral anti-constitutional orders. Heck, I'm an anarchist, and even I can see this. Why can't the feds acknowledge it? So now let's get into the designation of the terror groups. Because this actually, I want to show you, this is a pretty good one. Who put this up? Sputnik. Sputnik put this up. U.S. looks to revise prize courts. And they made pirate ships out of them. That's pretty good with the red, white, and blue. It's almost like they got Mickey Mouse ears going on there. If you're just listening in audio, it's just, some interesting stuff. So, okay, we'll get into some of the other economic stories in a minute as we talk about the economic slide, jet fuel, diesel fuel, things like that. And the U.S. so-called sanctioning other nations, especially if they do business with Iranians. In other words, how to isolate the United States itself and crumble the dollar even more rapidly than the U.S. debt and the Fed already were crumbling the U.S. dollar. And we'll look at what nations hold the most U.S. debt and also talk about the potential that Donald Trump will restart more kinetic activity against Iran very soon. And we'll look at other things like, the Israelis using AI to create fake so-called think tanks to put out fake think tank reports that then would populate the internet to make it look like Israel was awesome, so that other AI engines would draw off of these reports from these non-existent so-called think tanks that were made up in the imaginations of Israeli AI. Does that make sense? Yeah. Well, let me give you some of this stuff because I think this is key. Okay, so over here, this is key. First off, I've got this. U.S. designating Palestine Action as a terrorist group was already arguably the most insane attack on free speech in recent Western history. And now it's the official position of the UK. The UK designating Palestine Action as a terrorist group. And now the U.S. government is following suit. So let me give you some of this other information. The United States administration is warning the new UK Prime Minister that he better keep supporting Israel. So you'll see this. British Prime Minister Andy Burnham has been warned he risks a trade war with President Trump if Burnham imposes sanctions on Israeli settlements. The U.S. is ready to sacrifice its closest ally for a genocide state, says Owanka. Okay? Let me go to this. Down here, I said Max Blumenthal of the Gray Zone joined Judge Napolitano to discuss this United States influence and the U.S. designating the Israeli influence on the United States and the U.S. administration designating not solely Palestine Action as a terrorist group, but many others. It goes back to National Security Memorandum 7 of fall of last year. Remember that? And I'm glad we tried to get out the word about that. First, I'm just going to give you some of this information. Here's the latest on the so-called evil people Trump is citing through use of the National Security Memorandum 7. So this is a link over to the press release. Treasury takes action against violent far-left terrorist networks. Remember how they said, well, if you're anti-Christian, you're anti-capitalist, as they define capitalism, which is fascism, not capitalism. Well, here it is. Yesterday, the Trump administration designated Autistic Avantati Palestine Action, and Masir Badal as specially designated global terrorist organizations under post 9/11 sanctions authority. Did you catch that? Post 9/11 sanctions authority. So what have we been saying for a few weeks? The term sanctions has no meaning when you actually look within the Constitution. It doesn't exist. It's just a word that they apply to them wanting to take people's stuff and block trade and try to starve people of trade. So they are freezing U.S. reachable assets, taking their stuff and barring American transactions. Treasury today and yesterday accused the Italian tech collective of hosting encrypted tools for left-wing networks. Now, I didn't see any Italian tech collective blowing the hands off of little kids in Beirut. Did you? And yet, Donald Trump accepted from Benjamin Netanyahu a gold-plated pager in honor of just that terrorist action. And so did Senator Fetterman accept a silver-plated one from Netanyahu. And he said, wow, it's the most amazing gift I've been given. This just blows me away. So we've got UK Direct Action Group, of course, Palestine Action, and they have engaged in factory raids and some property damage targeting Israel-linked arms firms. Masir Badel has been accused of serving as a front for already sanctioned Palestinian prisoner advocacy networks. From a civil liberties view, this stretches terrorism from mass casualty violence to protest, to encryption, and Palestinian solidarity. Sabotage of weapons plants can be prosecuted as crime without branding an entire political cause a terror network. Equating opposition to Israel's war with material support for terrorism chills speech, association, and the right to boycott. And of course, if those weapons plants have government contracts, then you have a right to go in and say, no, I'd rather have my portion of my money back. Let's hear Max Blumenthal go into detail on this.
Well, I should mention, I wasn't planning on saying this, but you just reminded me that the government of Canada has just denied entry to a key ally of Netanyahu named Ari King. I should say he's a key ally of members of Netanyahu's governing coalition. Ari King is a important settlement leader who has been involved in personally, physically evicting and removing Palestinians from their homes in East Jerusalem and planting Jewish settlers in their homes. And he has called for extreme genocidal violence against Palestinians. And he was scheduled to give a talk hosted by the quote unquote Jewish community in Toronto until his visa was pulled at the last second. These are the figures who will come back into power under Netanyahu.
You mentioned a few minutes ago the British government treatment of Palestine Action. What is Palestine Action, and what has the American State Department had to say about it?
Palestine Action is the most effective Palestine solidarity group in the world. They're effective because they haven't been just marching down the street with picket signs and making appeals to Western politicians who can either be defeated, intimidated, or bought off. They're taking action themselves. And what they've done is they've gone to Elbit Systems factories of the Israeli state-owned weapons company in the UK, broke into these factories and vandalized them. They vandalized the clean room, which makes the factories extremely hard to get back online. And they've occupied the factories for days and days, shutting down production. They have wounded no one. They have killed no one. They aim to harm no one. What they aim to do is shut down these factories, and they've succeeded in shutting down 4 factories. And then they go to trial. And when they go to trial, Palestine Action almost always succeeds because they go before a jury, and when they have been allowed to provide context on their activism, to say, we did this to actually save lives, and what we did, the cost of what we did is outweighed by the cost of the mass slaughter of children in Gaza, they win. The jury sympathizes with them. And so what the British state has been doing is prescribing, they've attempted and succeeded in prescribing them as a terrorist organization in order to subvert the jury system and to basically subvert democracy itself we've been breaking these stories at the Gray Zone because the British press has been banned from reporting what I'm about to tell you, which is that in the last 2 or 3 trials of Palestine Action defendants, the jury has not been allowed to know that if they convicted them for a minor criminal charge like vandalism, they would then be sentenced by the judge as terrorists. The British press was not allowed to report on these trials or on the pre-trial proceedings. So they were literally banned by the judge. So it fell to us. And now the Trump administration, which is effectively controlled by Israel, has designated this British nonviolent direct action group as a violent terrorist organization, along with 2 other groups on extremely, extremely thin grounds. And I'll tell you why I think they're doing this. There are 2 reasons, to be general. I know we don't have all day. Number 1 is they're afraid of direct action in the United States because it works, and Israel's afraid of it. That's why they have the National Security Policy Memo 7 issued by the Department of Homeland Security, declaring that pretty much any form of left-wing direct action is a form of terrorism. And then that gives them the ability to prosecute defendants and sentence them outside the scope of normal legal procedures. The second reason relates to another case, which is very, very interesting and actually shocking and disturbing, in which the U.S. Department of Justice has indicted and is seeking to extradite one of the most prolific funders of Palestine solidarity groups, anti-imperialist media, and aid to Gaza, who is sustaining possibly hundreds of families in the Gaza Strip on the verge of starvation. His name is Fergie Chambers.
Now, I want to pause it there because, when you play something for a certain period of time, sometimes things can sort of wash over people. I want to go back just a second because what Max is saying here is incredibly relevant. And again, he's citing real people and their hardship that is being caused by political forces that support the genocide machine in Israel. So I want to go back just a second. Again, so we have Palestine Action and other groups cited now under a completely unconstitutional, immoral, unethical, criminal act by the very same group that issued an executive order taking over the power grids in the United States over the past 2 days and claiming that they can just seize oil from any ship. No declaration of war, no letters of marque and reprisal. These are very, very basic civics lessons, and they are utterly running roughshod over these things because nobody wants to pay attention to these things. If you knew you were going to have a quiz on this on Friday in your 11th grade class, you would brush up on it. And yet so many people are so busy trying to handle their lives and the higher expenses thanks to Donald Trump. And so many people are so distanced from what Washington does. And the players who gain the most at it are investing so much in it that people don't even pay attention to what's going on. So let's go back again and hear Max.
Legal procedures. The second reason relates to another case, which is very, very interesting and actually shocking and disturbing, in which the U.S. Department of Justice has indicted and is seeking to extradite one of the most prolific funders of Palestine solidarity groups, anti-imperialist media, and aid to Gaza, who is sustaining possibly hundreds of families in the Gaza Strip on the verge of starvation. His name is Fergie Chambers. He is an heir to the fortune of the Cox family in Atlanta. They own, Cox Media. And he is a anti-imperialist, a convert to Islam who has been living in Tunisia. He went on vacation to Ibiza in Spain, and he was captured by police and is now being held in a maximum security prison in Spain. And so in order to compel the Spanish authorities to deport Fergie Chambers, extradite Fergie Chambers to the US for their major show trial, this is like the show trial the Trump administration wants of a radical leftist, they have to prescribe an organization that he has seemingly supported as a terrorist group. So it's retroactive designation of a group as a terrorist organization in order to prosecute an American citizen who has not carried out who has not committed any crime that I'm aware of, and was running a pretty legitimate foundation.
Wow. I mean,
just to pan out
of any of this, Max. This is news in the U.S. Not heard of any of it at all. I heard of Rubio declaring Palestine Action a terrorist group, but I didn't know the background. I didn't know the relationship.
So I want to pause it there. Now, this has a direct bearing on me and some of my friends within the Free State Project. And the reason it does is obviously because of the federal government engaging in subtle warfare against many of my friends. When the Free State Project chose New Hampshire, a lot of people started to move here. The FBI tried to infiltrate the Free State Project. They tried to set people up to get them to sell drugs and things like that so they could engage in basically sting operations on them. And most of the time, the Free State Project people would smell them, sniff them out, and say, that guy's a Fed, right? Don't deal with these people. Just leave them alone. Deal in your gray markets, sell your honey, that sort of thing, that sort of stuff, right? And part of what I know, and you know, is that my friend Ian is in federal prison now because Ian not only was selling Bitcoin, but Ian was one of the very high-profile people on 250 radio stations with Mark Edge on Free Talk Live, who was promoting the voluntarist, free market, peaceful, anarchist approach. Anarchist, not violent so-called anarchy of the socialists from the 1920s and 30s, the Molotov cocktail throwers who called themselves anarchists but were really collectivist socialists in a Rousseauian Marxist tradition, but instead real anarchists, people who believe in leaving their neighbor alone and in the non-aggression principle. Well, of course, the government's got to aggress against those people and try to target them. And they eventually got Ian on trumped up charges. As you heard Jacob Hornberger, a lawyer, mention, this is just ridiculous. Well, he's in federal prison. And so when I hear about what the U.S. government is labeling these organizations, and as you know, Palestine Action is not a violent organization. And even if Palestine Action were violent against the weapons makers in England, their money in England is going to fund the very chain link fence that is blocking them from getting into the weapons facilities. Their money's going to make the weapons. So, final bit from this great segment.
With Cox Media. Wow.
Can I just add a few quick things to this?
Sure, please.
I think, especially your libertarian viewers will be really interested to know this. One of the other groups that the Trump administration has declared as a terrorist organization is called Atustici Inventati. And it's an Italian group that provides encrypted web services and encrypted communications for activists. And one third-party activist had posted material from a quote-unquote Antifa group in Portland. Therefore, the Trump administration is attempting to tie this group to direct action activists in Portland in order to declare that they themselves are terrorists. They're somehow linking them to Hamas. But if we look at this a little bit more carefully, what they're simply trying to do is declare that encrypted communications, lay the groundwork for outlawing encrypted communications where they can't spy on you. So that's what that's about, along with the Fergie Chambers issue, where my understanding is we actually released the sealed indictment, which upset some people who are like propagandists for Trump, like Laura Loomer. But my understanding is the indictment is going to be unsealed at any minute, which will prove my point that this is a lot of this has to do with nailing one man. But they're going full bore against the First Amendment, against the Fourth Amendment, against the Fifth Amendment. And this is the fallout from the failure in Iran, where, as we've seen time after time in American history, when a war has failed or a war has caused enormous social damage, for example, World War I, the King's War, wiping out entire classes of college students, that was followed by the Palmer raids, Earl Palmer shutting down anti-war groups by force. We're seeing that again with the Trump administration, where the war is coming home and they're about to launch a HUAC-style assault on the anti-war movement.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. This is major, major stuff. And again, some of this touches on things I've already experienced, but they're ramping this way up now, everybody. And I misread the, what was that organization that I was mentioning? The Autostici. That's what it was. Autostici Inventati from Italy. Okay, well, we know the good and evil are arrayed right now, and we're in a spiritual, magical, terrible battle of evil, of dark forces who would kill kids and exterminate entire generations. And a lot of people are seeing their beliefs start to crystallize even more intensely. And so I want to take a moment now and switch out of that first major story of the imperial presidency with a couple lessons that we've drawn. Of course, the idea that there's an American experiment in self-governance that's utterly bogus. We can see how they undercut the Articles of Confederation, and things have metastasized ever since Alexander Hamilton's days, right into Abraham Lincoln, right into the executive presidency now, all the executive orders and all the ways that they'll try to crush everything that's supposedly protected by the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Well, obviously, they haven't stopped these people. And so we know we're being tested.